The dog faced humiliation from his family for his entire life, until at last a neighbor stepped in. Sometimes, wickedness conceals itself behind the most mundane fences. In a tranquil suburb where neighbors exchange smiles across verdant lawns, a single glance could alter everything. A gaunt white canine with hollow flanks and eyes filled with a silent scream sat against a wall, tethered by a weighty chain. At that very moment, his owners were chuckling over lunch, oblivious to the starvation and agony right beside them. Until one day, a neighbor paused and realized that remaining silent was no longer an option. The neighbor's name was Genyo. He resided one house away from the family keeping that dog. Every morning he went out to irrigate his flowers, and every time he heard, not a bark, but some raspy, weary sound, resembling a sigh. Initially, he pretended not to notice. "Not my concern," he told himself. But on that particular morning, something was different. The sound of a blow. Then a brief, suppressed whimper. Genyo stood still. His heart pounded against his chest, as if demanding, "Go and check." He approached the fence, set down his bucket, stepped onto an old wooden crate, and understood everything. The dog lay by the wall, trembling all over, the chain stretched to its limit. Nearby stood a man, the owner, with a stick in his hand. His face was flushed, his eyes malicious, like a person who had lost all humanity. Genyo didn't recall how he leaped off the crate, he only felt his legs carrying him toward the gate of their own accord. "Hey," he shouted. "Cease this." The man turned around and scowled. "This is my mutt. Beat it." "You are killing him," Genyo stated, and his voice quivered not from fear, but from fury. For a moment, the air between them seemed to solidify. Then the man hurled the stick onto the ground and grunted, "Get out." But Genyo did not leave. He walked past, lifted the dog into his arms. A warm, almost weightless body, skin under the fur-like paper. "It's okay, hush, little one," he whispered. "You aren't alone now." From behind came a dull voice. "Give it back, that's mine." Genyo didn't look back. He simply stepped outside the gate and shut it behind him. Genyo practically ran home, pressing the canine to his chest. Its breathing was intermittent, with wheezing, as if every inhalation was an effort. Brown traces of blood and dirt remained on his t-shirt, but he paid no attention. In the yard by the threshold, his wife Marina met him. She was wiping her hands on a towel and froze when she saw her husband. "Genyo, what is this?" "The neighbor's dog. They are beating him." His voice cracked. "I couldn't watch." Marina stepped closer, carefully touched the dog's snout. He slightly opened his brown eyes, clouded with pain. "God," she whispered. "He needs to go to a clinic immediately." They spread an old quilt right on the kitchen floor. Genyo brought a bowl of water, but the dog merely licked the rim. He closed his eyes for a second, feeling anger, helplessness, and fear rising to his throat. Marina was already phoning the veterinarian. "Yes, doctor," she spoke rapidly. "Found a dog, beaten, breathing heavily." "Yes, the address." "Thank you. We are waiting." Half an hour later, Dr. Lena arrived in a sports jacket and with a weary face. She knelt nearby, examined the hound, palpated the ribs, paws, eyes. "Old scars," she said softly. "He was beaten not for the first time." Genyo stood, clenching his fists. "I will file a report on him." "Wait." Marina intervened. "First let's save him, then we decide." The doctor sat up and for drip. "He has dehydration, but there is a chance. The main thing is that this night passes calmly." Genyo sat alongside, not taking his eyes off the dog. "You will survive, do you hear?" he whispered. "Everything will be different." When Lena drove away, silence reigned in the house. Marina poured tea, her hands trembling. "You understand that they might call the police," she said. "Let them call," Genyo replied. "Let the whole world find out how they treat animals." He walked to the window. In the yard opposite, a shadow flickered. The neighbor stood by the gate. smoking, not averting his gaze from their house. Genyo felt a chill run down his spine, but he did not intend to retreat. The night dragged on endlessly. The dog, now Marina suggested naming him Tobik, breathed more evenly but slept restlessly, twitching his paws as if running away in a dream. Genyo sat nearby, occasionally stroking his head. Toward morning, when grey light spilled onto the kitchen floor, the canine opened his eyes and sighed quietly. "Alive," said Genyo. "Alive, little one." He didn't know what awaited them ahead, complaints, threats, disputes, but for the first time in a long while, he felt that he had acted correctly. Sometimes one step is enough to stop being a witness and become a human being. The neighbors started whispering the very next day. In the evening, when Genyo went out into the yard, a neighbor approached him, elderly Aunt Gardier in a robe and with her constant cup of tea. "Genyo, I saw everything," she said quietly. "That scoundrel has been mocking the dog for a long time." Only everyone stayed silent. "And why didn't you speak up earlier?" he asked, not raising his eyes. "Because everyone is afraid. He has connections, a brother in the administration. You will have to deal with him now. You won't see the end of problems." Genyo clenched his teeth. "Let him be friends with the devil himself. I will not remain silent." That same evening, there was a knock at the door. Marina, looking through the peephole, turned pale. "It's him." On the threshold stood the neighbor Garrick, a large man with bloodshot eyes and a cigarette in his fingers. "You took my dog," he pronounced hoarsely. "I saved an animal that you nearly killed," Genyo answered calmly. "He is mine," the man yelled, taking a step forward. Marina instinctively stood between them. "Get out or I will call the police." The man smirked, spat on the step, and, while walking away, muttered, "We'll see who will be saving whom." When the door closed, Genyo felt his hands trembling. "He won't stop," said Marina. "Let him try." The next morning he went to the precinct. A young duty officer listened sluggishly, picking at his notebook with a pen. "You claim you saw him beating the dog?" "Yes." "Are there witnesses?" "No, only me." "You understand?" "Without evidence." The policeman shrugged. "We can record the statement, but it is unlikely anything will come of it." Genyo signed the papers anyway. At home, Marina met him with silence. Tobik slept by the radiator, sniffing quietly. "You know," she said finally. "I thought that by saving him, you would return kindness to their house. And now I am afraid." Genyo looked at the dog. "Fear is what feeds types like him, and I am no longer hungry." In the evening, the veterinarian Laner called. "I passed the data to the shelter Bereg Nadezhdy. They are ready to take the dog if you want." "No," answered Genyo after a pause. "He will stay with us until he gets back on his paws." Several days passed in anxious waiting. Garrick did not appear anymore, but sometimes Genyo noticed his car driving slowly down the street. He began waking up at every rustle, getting up, checking locks, approaching the window. Sometimes it seemed to him that he heard quiet breathing behind the fence. One night Tobik suddenly growled, stood up, his fur standing on end. Genyo turned on the light. A shadow flashed by the gate and vanished. In the morning, a crumpled scrap of paper lay under the gates. "Return, before it is too late." Marina wept. "Genyo, he is capable of anything. And I am capable of protecting both him and us." He hung a lantern by the door and bought a surveillance camera. For the first time in a long while, Tobik approached him on his own, carefully pressing his head against his knee. Genyo smiled. "You see, we both learned not to be afraid." That night he slept calmly. Moonlight shone in the window, and the dog lay nearby, breathing evenly and peacefully. A week passed. Life seemed to enter a quiet channel. Marina went to work, Genyo repaired the fence, and Tobik was already trying to run around the yard. His fur grew back, his eyes became clearer. Something appeared in them that wasn't there before, trust. But one day everything changed. It was early morning. Genya was drinking coffee in the kitchen when he heard a creak by the gates. He looked out, no one. Only a light wind fluttered a piece of paper pinned to a board with a nail. Consider that you were warned. In the evening, when Marina was returning home, Garik was waiting for her. He stood by the gate, hands in pockets, a smirk on his face. Well, is the hero satisfied? Now everyone knows you are a snitch. Step away from my house, said Genya, coming out onto the porch. Or what? Or I will call the police. Har, the man chuckled. Do you think they will do anything to me? He stepped closer. The smell of cheap tobacco hit the nose. Return the dog, before it's too late. Marina came out after him. We will not give him back, she said, tremblingly but firmly. Garik looked at her, his eyes narrowed. Then don't complain if something happens at night. He turned around and left, slamming the gate. At night Genya did not sleep, listening to every sound. Even Tobik was restless, growling, jumping up, staring at the window. Closer to 3 a.m., a crackling sound rang out. Genya rushed outside, flames. An old pile of boards by the fence was burning. He rushed for a bucket. Marina called the firefighters. Fortunately, the fire didn't have time to spread, but the smell of burning remained for a long time. It is him, said Genya. He wanted to scare us. The next morning he went to the police again, but there they only threw up their hands. No evidence, no camera footage, no one saw anything. Then Genya made up his mind. He called Lena, the veterinarian. Tell me, do you have contacts for animal defenders, the kind who can help? I do, she answered. Serious people. Even officials reckon with them. A day later, a grey car drove up to Genya's house. A woman of about 40 in a strict coat got out. I am Olga from the Foundation Golos Bez Slav. We were informed about a case of animal cruelty. We will act officially. They went to the neighbor together. Genya walked behind her, feeling his heart pounding. Garik met them with a smirk. Oh, it's you again, brought guests. This is an inspector, Olga said calmly, showing her ID. We are conducting a check based on a complaint. She walked into the yard, examined the place where the dog was kept. A rusty chain, an empty bowl, traces of blood on the wall. Do you understand that this is a criminal article? She pronounced coldly. Yeah, screw you, grumbled Garik. But this time he didn't look so confident. A week later a letter arrived. A case had been initiated. Genya held the envelope in his hands and felt the lump in his throat turning into relief. He knew that there would still be a long proceeding. But the main thing was that the truth was now on his side. Tobik approached him more often, lay down nearby, put his head on his knees, sometimes whined quietly, as if remembering the past. Genya stroked him on the back. No one will hurt you anymore, do you hear? No one. One evening, already after sunset, he stood by the gate, looking at the neighboring yard. It was empty now. Garik had disappeared. They said he went away to relatives while the investigation was ongoing. Marina approached, hugged him by the shoulders. You did the right thing, she said. You could have just stayed silent. The stars twinkled dimly in the sky. Tobik lay by the threshold, moaning softly in his sleep. The world finally became a little calmer. Several weeks passed. Winter was slowly coming into its own. The air became colder. The grass turned white with frost. In Genya's house it was warm, cozy, smelling of fresh bread. Marina was decorating the kitchen with a garland, and by the threshold lay Tobik, now a completely different dog. He had gained weight. His coat became shiny and his gaze lively. Sometimes he brought slippers, funnily dragging them across the floor. And then he would sit nearby, as if asking, well, how was that? Am I a good boy? Genya smiled and scratched him behind the ear. Good boy, Tobik, very much so. But the peace did not last long. One morning the doorbell rang. Genya opened it. On the threshold stood a man in uniform. Good day, Investigator Doronin. A petition has been received from lawyer Kopylov regarding the return of the animal to the legal owner. Genya felt everything inside him drop. What owner? He tortured the dog. I understand, the investigator said calmly. But until there is a sentence, legally the animal is listed as his property. Marina came out onto the porch, having turned pale. Do they want to take him away? Yes. Silence fell inside. Tobik walked up to them, buried his snout in Genya's hand, as if sensing that something terrible was happening. No, said Genya, I will not allow this. That same day he contacted Olga from the foundation. We knew he would try, she answered. Do not worry, we will file a counterstatement. We have photos, veterinarian reports, testimonies. He will not get him back. 2 weeks went into paperwork, a hearing, and waiting. Every evening Genya returned home exhausted. But when Tobik met him at the door, everything became simpler. On the day the court decision arrived, Marina was the first to open the envelope. The lawsuit for the return of the animal is rejected. Genya sank onto a chair, covering his face with his hands. It's over, little one, he whispered. You are home now. Forever. Marina approached and hugged him. Tobik jumped onto their knees, wagging his tail, as if he understood himself, freedom. Light snow was falling in the yard. Everything finally became as it should be. Calm, quiet, and humane. Spring arrived unnoticed. The snow melted, the grass turned green in the garden, and Tobik ran out without a leash for the first time. He raced around the yard, the sun glistening on his fur, and Genya stood by the gate and watched as the dog chased the shadow of passing clouds. Now the yard was full of life. Marina planted flowers, laughed, and in the evenings the three of them sat on the bench, listening to the crickets and talking about trifles. Sometimes Genya still recalled that day, the chain, the pain, the fear, but now these memories did not cause pain. They became a reminder, goodness remains where a person stops walking past. Tobik ran up, laid his snout on his knees, and whined quietly, as if thanking him. Genya ran his hand over his head, looked into the sky, and smiled. You know, buddy, he said, sometimes we save someone, but it turns out they are saving us. In the yard, the wind rustled, the leaves swayed, and the world became a little warmer.